I don't know if disinformation is the right word or just lack of reality. We had an interesting exchange at the State Department yesterday with a reporter from the Gray Zone who was talking to Matt Miller and was asking him kind of what our policy is actually supposed to be. Watch this exchange.
We often hear in response to these concerns that, well, Putin, Khomeini, they're war criminals, they're terrorists, as if they're too inherently evil or immoral for us to negotiate with. But meanwhile, this administration has financed a genocide in Gaza for the last year, and every day you're up there denying accountability for it. So, what gives you the right to lecture other countries on their moral?
So if you have a policy question for me, I'm happy to take it. If you want to give a speech, there are plenty of places in Washington where you can give a speech.
Yeah, but people are sick of the bullshit in here. It is a genocide. You are abetting it, and you are risking nuclear war in Ukraine for this proxy war.
Plenty of other places to give a speech. Go ahead.
Thank you.
So I know you've seen that, and if you weren't able to hear that time.
No, that time I was able to hear it.
Okay, good. I'm glad it was worked out that way. But you can see that usually they just are asking questions and they just take the answers. But this time it looks like some of them are getting a little frustrated with the obvious dichotomy between what we say and then what we're actually doing. How did you read that?
Oh, I think the man's assessment is accurate. And the danger, of course, is that the Ukrainians, under the guidance of the CIA and MI6, ultimately launch some more deep strikes, and the Russians react to them in a way that we would rather they didn't. I hope that's not the case, but we've seen evidence for a lot of ISR flights from private contractors up and down the border with Russia from Europe, all the way from the Adriatic and the Black Sea up to the Baltic. So there's always a chance that something like that could still happen if the Ukrainians launch something and actually manage to strike something that's really important. But having said that, the real danger now is, in my judgment, the Middle East. And what we have to understand is that Israel is about to have its little bighorn moment. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, Custer split his force and ultimately rode into disaster because he thought if he didn't split his force and find the Indians and pin them down, that they would escape and run away. And I think his assessment or analysis, the threat assessment, if you will, was based on lots of experience in the West. Well, what he found out was that his intelligence assessment was fundamentally flawed. Not only were the Indians for the first time united against him, but there were enough of them that they could annihilate him. So I think Israel is on the verge of the little bighorn. Now, they're betting heavily that we can compensate for the weakness that they might have in certain areas. I think they're expecting us to fly the strikes with them, to launch missiles with them. We have certainly provided all the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance support that you could ask for, targeting data and so forth, for Iran. I don't know whether or not we have committed to fly those strikes yet. We have surprisingly stayed out of the Hezbollah disaster. But if the Israelis attack Iran, I think they'll throw everything they have at it. And the most likely response is that Iran will throw everything it has at Israel. And what we'll really witness for the first time, I think, in this century is a paradigm shift. We've talked a long time about air and missile power, but we've never really discussed in great detail air versus missile power. And we're very reliant on air power, so is Israel. The Iranians are very reliant on missiles. So it'll be interesting to see how this turns out, but I think it's going to happen.
And speaking of the air versus ground, in the last few minutes you have here, I want to show you a comment by Jack Keane, who was asked on Fox News about the difficulty of fighting on the ground in Lebanon, which, according to the tasks that the Israeli side has set for it, are just an enormous difficulty on the ground. And I wonder if you can speak to how it is, because when Keane was asked this question, he had this strange answer when the anchor said, "Hey, wait, but you're talking a three-front war. How can they win this?" Watch this.
Here's the challenge. At the end of the day, even if they push them across the Litani River and there's no additional rocket and missile or artillery firing taking place because they're out of range, how long do the Israeli forces have to stay there to ensure that they don't come back down across the river? And while they're staying there, Are they going to be continued to be ambushed and those forces be mortared and occasionally have artillery fire come on down on it and gradually take casualties?
Well,
that is the challenge that the Israelis are dealing with. They're fully aware of that challenge that I just mentioned. But this is a very difficult part of their campaign they're undergoing, and they are completely committed to succeeding here.
But, General, Israel is fighting a three-front war. Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran. How long can they maintain a three-front war?
Well, what they're about, Stuart, and I'm glad you brought it up, is they are about winning this war.
Okay, so they're about winning. Now, I know you only have a couple of minutes left, Doug, so if just as brief as you can, does Israel have a chance to actually accomplish a strategic objective in Lebanon?
I don't think so. I don't see much evidence for it. They haven't gotten very deep into Lebanon. As far as I can tell, they go a few kilometers, they run into very stiff resistance, and then they withdraw. General Keane was giving them credit for potentially overrunning everything south of the Litani River. I think that's an unrealistic expectation, but at least he pointed out that the notion that that somehow or another would result in a victory for Israel was probably delusional. The other thing is he missed some of the other components in the region. Obviously, you have the Iraqi militias, as well as the Houthis and Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran. But you've also got the Turks now. The Turks are increasingly prepared to intervene if they have to. And frankly, they feel pressed to do so. If you look at the numbers of refugees pouring north out of Lebanon, they're going towards Turkey. They have nowhere else to go. The Turks have sent a couple of warships down to Lebanese waters to evacuate Turkish citizens. They're armed to the teeth. Their Turkish air power is on the strip, ready to launch in the event that the Israelis decide to intervene against the Turkish ships that are rescuing their citizens. And, you know, Netanyahu is nothing if endlessly arrogant and foolish and reckless. He attacked the Russian facilities in Syria and promptly made Russia a co-belligerent in any future encounter with Iran. So at this point, if they go ahead and attack Iran, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't, it's hard to imagine that this is not the beginning of the end of Israel. That's why I call it the little bighorn moment. And tragically, I don't see much way around it, because the only way around it is for the president of the United States, in an attempt to save Israel, intervenes by saying no more. You know, we're going to cut you off, withdraw, pull back. We'll hammer this out at the negotiating table. See no evidence that Mr. Netanyahu will do that.
Yeah, I don't either. And we'll keep our eyes on this and see what happens on it, and hope that Israel can avoid having a little bighorn moment. Well, listen, I know you got to run, Doug. Thank you so much for coming on today. We always appreciate your time, as always.
Thanks, Dan.